Miriam, Natong Dr. Jolie Proudfit, Yaka Lusenyo Pankoisham, and Tongva. Good afternoon, and thank you for welcoming me into your space. You are an impressive group of individuals. And I stand before you, rooted in the ancestral memory and knowledges of my Pankoisham and Tongva bloodlines. I am the daughter of Helen Infante Roby, and my maternal grandmothers are Lupe Grijalva Guerrero, Refugia Flores Grijalva Zuniga, Candelaria Flores, Juana Apish, Pablo Apish, and it has been said that it was in Pablo Apish's home that the Treaty of Temecula was signed, which would have provided 7.5 million acres to the California tribes, but that did not happen. The land was not given to us. Those treaties were hidden in a vault. We gather today in a place many of you know as San Diego. Before anything else, I honor the Kumeyaay Nation, the host nation of this land that we stand today. The Kumeyaay and their Ipai, Tipai homelands have lived, governed, created, and cared for this place since time immemorial. I speak as a Pankoisham and Tongva woman from neighboring homelands. I honor the nations of this region, the Pankoisham, our bands, the Pama, Pachanga, Rincon, Saboba peoples. Among the Kumeyaay nations, Inaha, Casmet, Barona, Capitan Grande, Iyawap, Hamul, La Posta, Manzanita, Mesa Grande, San Pascual, Santa Isabel, Sequan, Viejas, along with the Kumeyaay relatives across the imposed border. I also honor the Los Quiotes people and our Kuya and Cupeño relatives whose homelands intersect with this region. Years ago, Vine Deloria Jr., my mentor and teacher, taught me that philosophy is not just written. It is lived through our relationships with each other, with history, and with the land itself. Today, I offer three things: a grounding in where we are, a truth-telling about what happened here, and an invitation to be ethical and in an ethical relationship with this place and its people. But I have to say first, I'm deeply honored to be here today when you inducted Dr. Dean, Professor Stacy Leeds. I had not met her before, but one of my professors, Devin Mehesu, has always spoken so highly of you. And it's very rare for Native women to be in spaces and places like this, but it's becoming less rare. So my heart is very warm to be here, and thank you for recognizing one of our women. This is not to, in any way, set aside any of your accomplishments. We are all in relationship. The previous speaker is an indigenous warrior for all of us, and the land and the waters and the air we breathe. And this is how we must see ourselves, in relationship to one another, to the air, to the water, to the land. This is not just poetry, this is survival. And it's also good to see and finally meet Dr. Jacobs. I had the good fortune of knowing his son very well, Jeff Jacobs. We share the same birthday, Jeff and I, and Dr. Seuss. But I always love to find relationship. It humanizes us. There's so many things that we look to separate ourselves. And so when you see someone and you say, my husband is best friends with Skipper, who is best friends with your son, we find a relative. And in that way, we are all related. To be grounded in place is to understand that you are not separate from the land beneath your feet. It means recognizing that presence creates responsibility. In Kumeyaay philosophy, Michael Connolly Mikwish teaches this responsibility flows from ihun, heart and spirit. Everything possesses ihun, the rocks, the water, our oak trees, the mountains, the animals. All are relatives All require care. When you are grounded in place, you understand that you have entered into kinship, and kinship demands reciprocity. Connolly, Mikwish, his work in Kumeyaay cosmology reveals a worldview where humans are not the center of creation, but one part of an interconnected web of relationships. Kumeyaay cosmology teaches that the universe operates through balance and reciprocity. What you take, you must give back. Physics. This is not metaphorical ethics. This is practical instruction for survival. When we understand that mountains are ancestors, that water has consciousness, that plants are relatives who choose to share with you, you cannot exploit. You can only participate in relationship. This is not a metaphor. This is philosophy as practice, a way of being that has sustained indigenous peoples and these ecosystems for thousands of years. And this philosophy is more urgent now than it has ever been. We face climate catastrophe, mass extinction, megafires, and collapsing water systems. We cannot survive by treating the earth as property to be owned or resources to be extracted. We can only survive through responsibility, through being good relatives to the land. Dr. Stan Rodriguez, Ipai Kumeyaay scholar, fire practitioner, and language revitalization leader, has spent decades demonstrating that traditional ecological knowledge is not primitive. It is sophisticated science, tested over millennia. His work spans fire management, which prevented catastrophic wildfires and promoted biodiversity, and Kumeyaay language immersion programs that ensured the survival of Kumeyaay ways of knowing. Language and land are inseparable. You cannot practice traditional fire management without the Kumeyaay words that encode when, where, and how to burn. Dr. Rodriguez's work shows that revitalizing language is revitalizing relationship with the land itself. We here in California have either been touched by fire, will be touched by fire. Every home I've ever owned in every county I've ever lived, I have been evacuated. This last fire in January burned our home in Pasadena on our Tongva homelands. My Tongva tribe is non-federally recognized. My Luiseño tribe is federally recognized. And so what happens when the land, the little land that your tribe has, whether federally recognized or not, what happens when it all burns? What happens when your burial sites all burn? These are serious questions we have to face, have faced, and will be facing. Before this region bore Spanish and English names, it was known through Kumeyaay language, a naming system that encoded ecological knowledge, seasonal patterns, and ancestral memory. What settlers renamed La Jolla was Matkulahui, land of holes, referring to sea caves carved by the ocean over millennia. San Diego sits at the heart of villages like Kusai, near Old Town, Tasir at the Big Water, near the bay, inland Hapai water coming down, marked springs near Alpine, and Pamo stood in Mission Valley where multiple eco zones converged. Each name teaches us that Kumeyaay people did not see themselves as separate from the land. They were the land, they are the land. Their villages were expressions of belonging, carefully situated where water, plants, animals, and people could thrive together. When we use only colonial names, we erase this knowledge. When we restore Kumeyaay names, we restore relationship. This knowledge matters now more than ever. Since time immemorial, indigenous peoples maintain California's ecosystems in balance. This wasn't luck, this was science, practice with the understanding that human survival depends on ecosystems and healthy ecosystems. To understand our current crisis, we must understand what we have lost. Genocide didn't just kill people, it severed the relationship that kept these ecosystems alive. And yes, I use the term genocide, a state-sanctioned genocide, one that this governor has finally apologized for. Between 1846 and 1873, California indigenous population declined from approximately 150,000, and we believe that's a low estimate, to fewer than 30,000. This was not disease, this was policy. Every indigenous person killed represented generations of knowledges destroyed, relationships severed, responsibilities abandoned. In 1850, California passed the Act for the Government and Protection of Indians. Be wary when policies have the word protection in them. A law that made slavery legal for California Indians under another name. Indigenous people, including children, could be indentured for vagrancy. Children were taken from families and bound to white settlers. California became a slave state for indigenous peoples. In fact, if you know the history of California, much of it is based on a slave economy and on a prison economy. California paid bounties for indigenous scalps. Between 1850 and 1861, the state reimbursed militias over $1.5 million for expeditions to kill indigenous people. Entire villages were destroyed, women and children were murdered. These were not isolated incidents. They were coordinated campaigns to eliminate California Native peoples and seize our land. In 1851, 3 federal agents negotiated 18 treaties that would have set aside 7.5 million acres of California Indian reservations. Remember the treaty signed on my 5th great-grandfather's kitchen table. California's white settlers protested. They wanted all the land. In 1852, the U.S. Senate held a secret session and rejected all 18 treaties. The treaties were hidden for over 50 years in a vault not revealed until 1905. Indigenous people who had negotiated in good faith, who had moved to designated lands, found themselves landless and without legal protection. The federal government stole treaty promises and abandoned California Indians to genocide. And all the California tribes in California exist through executive order, not through treaty. It took until 1944 for the federal government to acknowledge any responsibility. After decades of legal battles, in 1964, California Indians were compensated 47 cents per acre for 64 million acres of stolen land. 47 cents per acre. This was not justice, it was an insult. I remember when my mother received that paycheck. I was born in 1969, and in the early 1970s, when she received our payment, she had 2 children, and we went from sleeping in one bed to having her purchase multiple mattresses. That's what we received for our land. The money came with no land returned, no sovereignty restored, and no acknowledgement of genocide. And yet we are still here. Despite genocide, despite slavery, despite bounties and massacres and stolen treaties, despite 47 cents an acre, we are still here. The Kumeyaay people are still here, speaking their language, practicing their ceremonies, teaching their children. Dr. Stan Rodriguez has been instrumental in Kumeyaay language revitalization and immersion programs around the world. In fact, I almost could not come. I was invited several months ago, and I debated because I had another important events, actually 2 events. Tomorrow I leave for the World Indigenous Peoples Conference in New Zealand to discuss AI and Indigenous communities because this is important. We know that this is important. And the environmental impact on our water, our air, our lands, on all of us, it's very important. But Monday, I had another important event, this past Monday. And this is a fun event. And there's a person that I think everybody in here is of an age that they may know who I'm talking about. But I'm also an edutainer. I really believe in making this information palatable for folks who don't want to hear all the kind of negative policies. I'm a producer on a documentary, Jim Thorpe, Path Lit by Lightning, the greatest athlete who ever lived. And today we sent in our application for a Peabody Award, so hopefully we get it. But Monday I was at Nike headquarters, screening it at Nike headquarters. And I tell you this because it takes all of us to keep history alive. And when you have that level of excellence and those people in our history that make a Native child today smile, we must all do our best to lift them up. Let us not forget the great Jim Thorpe and all his contributions. They are many, but that is why I wasn't sure, and I apologize for the late. Normally, I love visuals and to give you lots of images as an edutainer, but I have spent the last 2 weeks in the inside of so many airports during the most challenging travel times, so forgive me for not having visuals for you. But I leave you with the Pacific Ocean. How's that? And some sunshine. When children learn Kumeyaay words for plants, seasons, and fire, they are learning how to be in relationship with place. Language revitalization is ecological restoration. When Kumeyaay fire practitioners return controlled burns to these hillsides, they are not just simply practicing sovereignty, they are sovereignty. When Kumeyaay language teachers say, Matkalahui, I'm Pankawichimantangba, not Kumeyaay, so I too have to ask my Kumeyaay cousins for pronunciations. Instead of La Jolla, they are restoring the world. When tribal nations protect water and sacred mountains, they are fulfilling responsibilities they have always held. Indigenous people, it's often been said, protect 80% of the world's remaining biodiversity. This is not coincidence. This is a result of knowledge systems that understand responsibility, that practice reciprocity, and see humans as part of ecosystems. But we cannot do this without collaborations and without all of you. California Indians are now teaching agencies like CAL FIRE how to burn properly. The agencies that once criminalized indigenous burning are learning from those they tried to silence. The knowledge survived, the relationship survived, and the responsibility survived. If we are to survive the next century, heck, if we're going to survive the next election cycle, we must listen and collaborate with indigenous knowledge systems, not appropriate our knowledge, not tokenize our participation, but actually return authority and resources to indigenous nations so we can do what they have always done, care for the land. If you live here, work here, study here, or benefit from being here, you have entered into a relationship with this place. Relationship creates responsibility. This is not guilt, this is not shame, this is recognition that presents an opportunity for obligation. California Indians have maintained their responsibilities despite genocide, despite theft, despite every attempt to erase us. We have never abandoned our responsibilities, even when nearly everything was taken from us. Now the question is, what are your responsibilities? I encourage you to work with the indigenous people around you, whether here, there, or anywhere. Understand the history of what happened to the place that you live on. Support Indigenous sovereignty. Land back is not a metaphor. It's a return of land management to those who know how to do it. It is recognizing that climate solutions without Indigenous leadership will fail. Defend what remains. When our sacred sites are threatened, stand with us. When Indigenous water rights are challenged, support us. When traditional ecological knowledge is dismissed, elevate Indigenous voices. Learn from Indigenous knowledge systems, incorporate them into your research, your thinking, and your work. But respect them as the sophisticated, necessary sciences that they are. This is what it means to be grounded in place. Not ownership, not nostalgia, but real lived responsibility. The kind that changes how you move through the world, how you make decisions, how you relate to the land, and the people whose ancestors has always been here. Kumeyaay philosophy teaches that everything possesses a hun, heart and spirit. The mountains, the water, the oak trees, the soil, the fire, all have a hun. And if you are here, you are part of this place spirit too. The question is not whether you are in relationship to this place. You are. The question is, what kind of relative will you be? Will you be the kind that takes without giving back? Or will you be the kind who understands that care is not optional, that if we want to survive the crisis we've created, we must learn responsibility from those who have never forgotten it. This land remembers, the mountains remember who tended them, the waters remember who protected them, California Indian people remember, and we are still here, still practicing responsibility, still offering us knowledge we desperately need. And let me be clear, we are not just surviving, we are leading across this country and across this county. There are 18 tribal reservations in San Diego County, more than any other county in the United States. And at least 14 of them are Kumeyaay homelands. The Kumeyaay Nation today is organized of 13 reservations in what is now San Diego County, and at least 4 more communities just across the imposed border in northern Baja. Statewide, we have 109 federally recognized tribes and dozens more unrecognized nations that hold only 500,000 acres in reservation land and a state of more than 100 million acres of territory. Less than 0.5% of California's land base under tribal control after 2 centuries of theft. Yet on the small fraction of land, California Indian nations are running governments, restoring forests and rivers, rebuilding languages, and protecting ecosystems. So when we say land back, when Kumeyaay people reclaim 1,100 acres, as they did just recently, or 17,000 acres there, we're not talking about nostalgia. We are talking about increasing the tiny percentage of this land that is once again in the hands of those who prove they can care for it. The genocide failed. The theft failed. The erasure failed. We are still here. Kumeyaay, Panguichum, Tongva, and California Indian peoples on both sides of the border, and the numbers themselves now testify to what our elders have always said. We are the past, the present, and the necessary future of this place. Nosholovik uhiyi. My heart is good. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Proudfit. Do we have some questions?
I figured you guys knew it all.
Is there one over there? Sir? Please say your name and where you're from.
Well, I hate to dominate questions. I'm Tom Klein again. I took my 1 year of California history way back in the 60s at UC Berkeley. And what struck me was how localized all those tribals. And you mentioned all these tribes in San Diego. And it occurred to me, how did they coordinate management of the environment if they were all in these very, very dedicated land where they stayed there for generation after generations, but they must have had to coordinate among different tribes to manage like fires and wildlife and so forth. Have we learned anything about how that was done?
Oh, absolutely. And when we say we are all related, it's both philosophical and biological. And so we had to work together. I'm not suggesting that we didn't have conflict, but when it came to the land, there was bartering, there was trade, right? Our cosmology, my Pankawicham ancestors and my Tongva ancestors have a lot in relationship to Hawaiians and to the Maori people because we're coastal people. So there was lots of negotiation from across the seas, but also localized. We see that in some of our languages. So in my language, Miohiam, in one of my languages, Miohiam is hello everyone, to a large group of people. In the Kuya language, which are the desert people like Palm Springs area in inland, it's Mihue, right? So of course we were related, of course we worked together. I'm so glad that you took a class in California Indian history in the 1960s, but it was only recently, as of 2 months ago, that we submitted, and I was one of 3 California Indian scholars that submitted 400 lesson plans to the state of California. This is the first time in the history of California's existence as a state government that they actually paid for some curriculum. So I'm hoping that this type of knowledge will be provided to all of the students in our great state.
One more question?
Is this working? Do I have to push something? No. We're in San Diego, which is the second name, I guess, this place has. What is the relationship between indigenous culture in this area and Mexican stewardship during the first half of the 19th century, let alone under Spanish stewardship from I think it was 1718 or 1721 when the mission was established. Did these indigenous traditions remain intact without interchange with Spanish and Mexican traditions? In the sense, you present a picture as if they're totally pristine in 1848 when they were under control of other peoples for 150 years, well, marginal control.
And you can say who you are.
Richard Kagan from Philadelphia.
So I had mentioned that there are Kumeyaay, Ipai, Tipai tribes across the border because that's an imposed border, right? And I have to admit that much of the traditional knowledge systems, especially language, is coming from across the border because they've been so isolated and the assimilation policies weren't as strong with them, that we're now looking to our border relatives for much more astronomical knowledge systems, ethnobotany knowledge systems. So our federal government policies did more to hurt our knowledge systems than it did our counterparts across the border. Those relationships are strong. We have ceremonies is really strong with our relatives across the border. Colonialism and California faced really 4 waves of colonization, and you could even say it was more than that if you look at the Jesuits, then the Franciscans, then the Spanish, then the Mexicans, then the Californios, and then the Americans, and now whatever we want to call this today, right? And so this is why we're not interested in blaming or shaming. We're interested in collaborating. Man, I was going to get a cool crest like with a lion. No, I got a half a leg with the knee with the lion's head sticking out of it. So my daughter and my husband are not going anywhere. We are all in this together.
Thank you, Dr. Proudfit.